Hello friends, welcome back to EduVec. Let us finish the final part of the chapter metals and non-metals, wherein we will be discussing about minerals and ores, extraction processes based on reactivity, and finally some processes like calcination, roasting and electrolytic refining. Towards the end of the chapter, we will also look at some commonly used alloys and their application in the industry. So moving on, what exactly is a mineral and what exactly is a ore? So mineral is any compound which has some desired concentration of metal or a non-metal which we want to extract. And ores are the profitable minerals, means where the concentration is significantly high and it makes sense to extract the metal or non-metal out of the ores. So it's a very common saying that all ores are minerals, but all minerals are not ores, because minerals might have very less concentration of desired metal or non-metal. And since you will be spending a lot of energy and a lot of money to extract this metal or non-metal, for some minerals it is not justified to do this process. Only when the concentration of desired metal or non-metal is high, only then we go for extraction. So such minerals where the concentration is high are called ores. So these ores can exist as oxides, sulfides or carbonates. This is of course based on reactivity, and we will see that what common metals exist as oxides and which exist as sulfides. Okay, so occurrence of, like I already said, occurrence of any mineral or ore is based on reactivity. So the more reactive the metal is, difficult it is to extract it from its ore. And the less reactive the metal is, it may be found even in its native state. You might only need to heat it up in the air without doing any process on it. So we'll see some examples here. Some common ores which are found, you can see cinnabar, this is the ore of mercury, which is HGS, then chalcocite, which is copper sulfide, then sphalerite or galena, zinc sulfide, saltpeter, which is potassium nitrate, and chyle saltpeter, which is sodium nitrate. Similarly, bauxite, a very important ore of aluminium, which is Al2O3, and finally dolomite, CaCO3.MgCO. So these are only some ores. You would have also heard about ores of iron like hematite, magnetite. There are several ores. I have just listed down the common. Moving on to next, let us come to the process of extraction. How exactly, based on reactivity, the the metals are extracted from the ores. First we have a ore. First we have to identify a ore, that okay, this ore is having a desired concentration of metal, and now we want to extract that metal from this ore. Now based on, once we have finalized that this ore will be using for extraction, we have three different types of metals. So I have classified them into three different categories. HR means high reactivity, MR means medium reactivity, and finally LR means low reactivity metals. So for high reactivity metals, we have to use electrolysis to separate the metal from the impurities, or to extract the metal from its ore, we have to use the process of electrolysis, because these are very high reacting, and in the reactivity series, these are placed on the top. So I hope you remember this reactivity series. These high reactive metals are on the top, and there are very less metals, or there is almost no metal which can reduce them. So we have to use electrolytic methods. Then if you do electrolysis, the impurity will be separated and you can get the pure metal. So some high reactive metals you can see here, these are potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium. So all these are extracted using electrolysis from their respective ores. Now coming to medium reactivity metals can exist as carbonates. The ores can be in form of carbonates. So if it is carbonate, you have to do a process called calcination, which is nothing but heated in limited amount of air or limited amount of oxygen. So when you do that, you can finally form oxides. Similarly, the medium reactive metals, they are also existing as sulfides, and to convert sulfides to respective oxides, you have to do something called as roasting, and roasting is heating in excess oxygen. So calcination was heating in limited amount of oxygen, and roasting is heating in excess amount of oxygen. So you can see the reason why, because it already has oxygen. So you have to heat it in limited amount of oxygen so that it breaks down. And similarly, to convert sulfide into oxygen, you have to heat it in ample amount of oxygen. Now, once you have done that, the end product of these two processes, be it a carbonate when you have done calcining operation, be it a sulfide when you have done roasting operation, it will form a oxide. And now to get metal or the desired element from the oxide, we have to, of course, go for reduction. Then we finally reduce, and then we get a metal. And sometimes it might be required to purify the metal, because it will have some impurities dissolved in it. Now, coming to the examples of medium reactivity metals, you can see here zinc, iron, lead, copper. These are medium reactivity metals, and you have already seen the zinc is existing as zinc sulfide, and similarly copper is also existing as copper sulfide, and it is also existing as copper carbonate. So depending on the reactivity, you will either have a carbonate or a sulfide. In both cases, using either calcination or roasting, you convert it to oxide and then you reduce it to get the metal. Now, coming to low reactivity metal, these typically exist as sulfides, and if you know that you have sulfide, you have to do roasting operation on it, and just by roasting you should be able to get a metal. This metal will, of course, will have some impurity, and there are ways to refine it. Some examples of low reactivity metals are silver, gold, platinum, copper. These are also found in native state, means either it will exist as a sulfide or they will exist in the pure form. You just have to do some refining operation on it. You don't have to do any sort of roasting or any sort of chemical operation or unit operation on that. So copper and mercury, they can be obtained by just heating in air without doing any other operation on them. So if you see HGS, which is a ore of mercury, when you heat it in oxygen, it forms mercury oxide and it releases of SO2. And this mercury oxide, when you heat it again, it forms pure mercury and it gives off oxygen. Similarly, for copper sulfide, you know you have to do, it's a sulfide, you have to do roasting operation. Here also you have done a roasting operation. So copper sulfide, when you heat it in excess oxygen, it will form copper oxide, gives off SO2. And similarly, when you react this copper oxide with remaining copper sulfide, it will give you copper, and again it releases off SO2. So just by heating, you see in excess air, you are able to recover the metal. For zinc carbonate ores, so zinc will have two types of ores. It can also form a carbonate, and you know that you have to do calcination. Calcination is nothing but heating in air. And it can also have sulfide ores. For sulfide ores, you have to do roasting. We have seen here also that for all sulfide ores, we are doing roasting. And finally, once it is converted to oxide, zinc sulfide or zinc carbonate, when it is converted to oxide, you have to do reduction. Reduction is nothing but reaction with carbon. So you can see here zinc sulfide plus oxygen will give you zinc oxide and it releases of SO2. Similarly, zinc carbonate, it will form zinc oxide when you do calcining operation here and it gives off CO2. And then in both these reactions, once you have this zinc oxide, be it from the sulfide path or from the carbonate path, once you have zinc oxide, you react it with carbon, or in other words, you use carbon to reduce it to pure zinc. So why carbon is able to reduce zinc oxide? I think the answer lies in the reactivity series. So this is the reactivity series which we have already discussed in the past. So if you see carbon is above zinc, and you know from our previous chapters, especially chapter 1, chemical reactions and equations, we defined that, okay, as you go from bottom to top in a reactivity series, the metals or the reducing power of the metals, it increases. It means carbon will be a better reducing agent than zinc, aluminum will be a better reducing agent than carbon, and magnesium will be better than aluminum, and so on. Because the electropositivity or the tendency to lose electron increases from bottom to top, and that is the reason by why the reducing nature or the reducing power of these elements also increasing from bottom to top. So if you see here, carbon is above zinc, and that is the reason why carbon is able to reduce zinc and it is itself getting oxidized into carbon monoxide. So why only carbon? I think definitely there will be some more metals which can be used to reduce other metals. So you can see one example here. So manganese dioxide, when you react it with aluminum, it forms manganese, it forms alumina, it releases heat. So here again, aluminum is reducing MnO2, it's forming Mn, and itself it is getting oxidized to alumina. So again, this reaction is possible because, you know, aluminum is above manganese in the reactivity series. And if you identify the oxidizing and reducing agent, so aluminium is the reducing agent because it is reducing MnO2 and itself it is getting oxidized. So reducing agent is a compound which reduces other and itself gets oxidized. Similarly, oxidizing agent is a compound which will oxidize the other element and itself it will get reduced. Now coming to the second question, write one displacement reaction where heat released is large and write the application of the same reaction. So you can look at this thermite reaction. It's a very common reaction. So where you react Fe2O3 with aluminium, and since aluminium is above iron in reactivity series, it will be able to reduce iron oxide. So Fe2O3 is getting reduced to iron and aluminium itself is getting oxidized to Al2O3. So it means aluminium is a reducing agent here. This reaction is called thermite reaction. And the application of this reaction is to weld joint cracked in machines, in railway tracks, in iron pipelines. Why? Because when you do this reaction, the amount of heat released is so much that iron formed is in molten form. So if you have a crack or if you have a weld joint which you want to join, this molten iron will fill the gaps, whatever is the cracked line or you have some cracked moving part of machine. Now another question, sodium, magnesium, calcium oxides cannot be reduced by carbon. We saw that zinc oxide is reduced by carbon to form pure metal zinc, but we cannot use carbon to reduce sodium, magnesium, calcium, aluminum. I think you know the answer to this. If you see, these are the metals which lie on the top part of the reactivity series. And since they themselves are very good reducing agents, the carbon will not be able to reduce them. So because carbon is below them in reactivity series. So what should we do about these metals? Or the general, or I would say a simple explanation would be these metals have more affinity for oxygen than carbon. And that is one of the reasons why these oxides cannot be reduced by carbon. Or the technical answer would be because these oxides are better reducing agent than carbon and they lie on top of the reactivity series. It is very difficult or it is impossible for carbon to reduce these. Okay, so these metals are extracted by electrolytic reduction of molten chlorides. So the reaction at anode will be the chloride ion changing to chlorine, and at cathode the positive ion of metal will be changing to pure metal. So these are the reactions which happen at anode and cathode in the electrolytic reduction process. Coming to another example, aluminium is extracted by Hall-Héroult process. So let us look into the process. So alumina has very high melting point. So we are doing electrolysis of alumina. It has very high melting point of 2072 degrees Celsius, which is almost impractical because you cannot conduct electrolysis at this temperature. It becomes a very energy intensive process. So we dissolve alumina in a compound called Na3AlF6 or cryolite to lower the melting point to 1000 degrees Celsius. Once we have mixed it with alumina, then a normal electrolysis process is carried out. So you know at cathode the reduction reaction will happen. Reduction is nothing but gain of electrons. So you get pure aluminium metal. And at anode, of course, oxidation will happen, which is the loss of electron. So now coming to electrolytic refining of copper, zinc, tin, nickel, gold, silver. So all these metals will go electrolytic refining in the same fashion. So let us take one example of copper and see what exactly happens in electrolytic refining. So first impure metal is taken, which we want to refine, and that is made as anode. And you know oxidation will happen at anode, and oxidation is nothing but loss of electrons. Pure metal is made the cathode. Cathode is reduction, which is gain of electrons. And finally, the solution of metal salt is chosen as electrolyte. So whatever metal you want to refine, the salt solution of the same metal will be chosen as electrolyte. So if you see at anode what will happen, copper will lose 2 electrons and it will form copper plus 2 ions. In electrolyte, copper plus 2 ions are already there. They will gain these 2 electrons and it will form copper. And this copper will be deposited on the cathode because it has to balance the mass. So you cannot have excess copper in the electrolyte. So whatever electrons coming from anode, this electrolyte has accepted, same amount of copper it has to deposit on the cathode. So you can see here, copper plus 2 ions plus 2 electron will again give pure metal, and this is the same amount of copper that is formed in the electrolyte, and from electrolyte it is deposited to cathode. So slowly over the time, what will happen, this anode will keep on dissolving due to this reaction. Electrolyte will remain the same because it is taking copper from anode and it is depositing the copper into the cathode. So this reaction will happen on the cathode, and finally you will have cathode which is pure copper, anode will dissolve away, and all the impurities which are getting separated from copper at anode will settle down at the bottom, and this is known as anode mud. And these are insoluble impurities. There will be soluble impurities also which will get dissolved in the electrolyte itself, but the insoluble impurities will be collected below the anode, and this is called anode mud. So you see here, this is one example of how electrolytic refining is done. So the most important thing to remember is that anode is impure metal, cathode is pure metal, and electrolyte which is used is the salt solution of the metal. Okay. Now corrosion we have covered in depth in the chapter chemical reactions and equations, part 3 of 3. If you have not seen this video, please go back to the video and have a look at it, because we have spent a really good time understanding corrosion of not only iron but also I would say aluminium, copper, silver. So I would request you to please go back to this lecture and have a look at it. So here we will move to another topic, another interesting topic, which is nothing but alloying. So what is an alloy? Alloy is nothing but a homogeneous mixture of two or more metals, and it can also be a mixture of metal and non-metal. So how typically alloys are made? This is not the only way of making alloys, but this is how generally it is done in case of simple alloys. First, primary metal, which is in the largest concentration, that is melted, and then alloying elements are mixed in molten state in desired proportion, and then they are mixed thoroughly to create a homogeneous mixture. Example would be stainless steel, which is very common. The primary metal is iron. You add nickel and chromium to make it resistant against corrosion, and then you also have varying carbon. So you can have a high carbon steel, you can also have mild or low carbon steel. So depending on what hardness you want, what are the other characteristics that you want, you vary the concentration of carbon. Now coming to some more common alloys which are used in industry and which you might have already heard, and where they are exactly used. So first one is amalgams. Amalgam is nothing, any metal or any non-metal which has mercury as one of the constituents, these are called amalgams. So it's a general class, and one example is arcurite, which has 87% silver and 13% mercury. So you can see this is how it looks like, and it is used in dental filling. Second example would be brass, which is 66% copper, and zinc would be around 34%. So these numbers are not rigid, that it will not always have 66%, but these are the most common formulations which you have. You can also have 70% copper and 30% zinc, or you can have maybe 60% copper and 40% zinc. It's allowed in brass. These are the most common configurations or most common compositions which I have mentioned here. Coming to bronze, which is a alloy of copper and tin. Tin is around 12% and remaining can be copper. Now coming to solder, which is commonly used in printed circuit boards or electronics for soldering of wires. So this is an alloy of lead and tin. Duralumin is another example, which is aluminium alloy. So primarily aluminium alloy. So it has 95% aluminium, 4% copper, and manganese and magnesium, they form around 1% of the composition. So this is how duralumin sheets look like, and these are used in making bodies of aircraft. Coming to Monel. Monel is nothing but alloy of nickel, copper and iron, where nickel is 60% typically, copper is 33% and remaining is iron. So again, these numbers can vary by some extent, but this is the most common formulation which is available. So Monel is a very, I would say, anti-corrosive metal. So these are used in pipes or in industries where we need a very high resistance against corrosion. For example, you have rapid flowing seawater. Because of NaCl, the corrosion rates are very high. So we try to use Monel pipes or Monel linings to prevent corrosion. Next example is sterling silver, which is used in artificial jewelries, and it has other applications also. So you can see it has 92% silver and it has 8% copper. Nichrome is nickel 80% and chromium 20%. So you would have seen nichrome wires. These are used as heating element in toasters or normal house heaters you would have seen. So these wires, they become red hot when electricity is passed through it, and these have very high melting points. So that is why these are used as heating elements. Now coming to final example, which is nothing but Babbitt metal. Babbitt metal has 90% tin, 7% antimony and about 3% copper. So industrial bearings, they are made from Babbitt metals because these have a property that they don't offer much friction when they are in contact with steel. So due to less friction, these are used in making bearings. So these are some common alloys which exist in our industry, and there can be much more alloys, but I have taken out some common alloys which you must be aware at this level. We will also see more alloys when we progress into the course. So that's all from my side for this chapter. We have completed this chapter, metals and non-metals. In the next lecture, we'll be talking about periodic classification of elements. And I have changed the sequence a little bit. The next chapter is supposed to be carbon and its compound, but since that is a different branch of chemistry, organic chemistry, and periodic classification is linked to the topics we have already covered. So first we take up this periodic classification of elements, and after that we will go to carbon and its compound. So if you liked this video, if you learned something new, please give us a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends as much as possible so that they are also able to take advantages of these lectures. Till then, thank you all.